like to welcome everyone to iMoot 2015, and the presentation Moodle as Help Desk by Mary Rydesky from Anchorage, Alaska. Mary's a longtime Moodler and has a lot of wonderful experience in education that she would like to share with us. And so without further ado, I'll turn the mic over to you, Mary.
Thanks, Anthony. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with everyone this morning. You know, when I'm introducing myself, I always talk about where I grew up, which was a very rural section of Pennsylvania. It's still so rural that our three major holidays are the beginning of hunting season, which would be 2 days, doe season and buck season, and the beginning of fishing season. But it was a great place to grow up. It was way out from any sort of concerns, and so we could easily run the hills, and I learned a lot about testing myself and trusting myself in those days. The other thing that was neat about that town is, although it was way out in the woods, Sylvania Electronics started there, which meant we had a lot of engineers. And one day, one of the guys got a notion that if he took a wire and ran it up on the fire station tower, we might have better reception for our television station, and thus cable TV was born. Well, with that kind of background, you can see that it was in my blood from an early age to know more about technology. And at the same time, I seemed to be a trainer, a teacher from an early age. When Moodle came out a number of years ago, a tech who was working for me said, "You need to look at this." And as soon as I saw that, I thought, wow, this is a great marriage of technology and training. Over the years of my career, I've been mostly in Texas before I came up to Alaska. And when I came through those years, I simultaneously served on faculty at various schools and universities, and at one point started into a career in IT. I was CIO up here in Alaska for one of the tribal healthcare organizations for a number of years. And as a result, I'm here to talk to you about this morning a little bit of use of Moodle in a different way. Rather than as a course, could we use it as a knowledge base to support any kind of functions, whether it's in IT or other aspects? So I'll go through these slides. I'll look for your hands if you have questions, and I believe that I can also see your texting in the chat. So please do stop me as we go along. It'll make it much more interesting, I think, than just delivering a lecture to you. So if you were reading and decided on this presentation based on what we had in the literature, I mentioned what we would cover as about 6 or 7 points, and we will do this. Again, I'm happy to go off topic with you if you have some experience and some ideas, things that we might bring into this that would make it even a little bit more lively. In terms of using Moodle in a function where you are answering questions, there are a number of points that I'd like to make with you. Number one, Moodle, as we know, is excellent at managing content that is requested at different times. And depending on how you set it up, it can be a self-serve, self-login, or you can lock it down to whatever audience you'd like to have reach it. Have you thought about using it for frequently asked questions? And many of us have a Moodle section where for our students and teachers, we do that already. So what if you were to take that to a broader scope for your organization? You also can use Moodle for in-depth orientation to any kind of function or structure or process. And as we all know, the training potential is immense. You can do more than deliver. You can test. You can get feedback. You can find out if you're doing more than pushing out information and actually training. I also like for this help desk concept the fact that we can integrate all manner of information. The old-fashioned mashup, if you will, allows us to have visual content, textual content, audible content, and the interactive features. And if you are thinking about reaching an audience with various accessibility needs, this is the place to go. One final value that I'd like to mention to you, if you have to present this to administration in order to get funded to do this sort of thing, is that using Moodle for your knowledge base in support of customer service or IT or grants management is that it enhances communication efficiently. Now, those three words cover a lot. Enhancing, you can't get away from the need to have person-to-person conversations and hands-on help. Communication is a word that means two-way, not just putting out information there. We've published a fact, we've told them how to do it, therefore it's done. We can get that feedback to us. And efficiency is the thing that administrators are going to listen to most. If we can offer them a process that will allow us to do so at a lower cost, at less need for staffing hours and support, then it's going to be of great interest, I believe. So what's the help desk? Let's be sure that we have a concept here. To me, the help desk is the named place that should have an impact on your organization. The idea is that help desk should end frustration and enable the user to fully function, but not have to wait an inordinate amount of times. You know, if you're using something and it won't work and you've got a deadline, it is very stressful. This morning, for example, I was having difficulty getting an internet connection and my palms were sweating. I was thinking, oh great, here we go, this is the problem. And I truly needed someone to help me through that who could stay focused on the task while I was thinking of content and meeting my deadline. The other thing that I think a help desk is or offers is what I affectionately call the learning moment. Someone is having a difficulty, and it's an opportunity for you to quickly meet that need, reduce the stress, but also to teach so that that person can get to the point of self-sufficiency. And if you do the job well, if it's not a system problem, but an end user problem, and you can create some training that allows that person to be self-sufficient, your statistics on help desk should show that that kind of problem is reducing in frequency, and there'll be other ones to replace it. Some of the features that we can offer using Moodle as a help desk, as I mentioned, were the facts for self-help. When we build a good knowledge base in Moodle and it's well indexed or well organized, those facts can be the tool that allow the user who's working in the wee hours while your staff is sleeping to have that ability to solve their problems and go on and be more satisfied with all of the services at your organization. I truly like how in 2.0 it's fairly easy for us to have live interaction when needed. You can set that up as a chat. You can set it up in ways that you could even go over to a remote monitoring and go to their desktop. There's just all sorts of things that we can link in now that make this a little easier than guessing what they're seeing on the screen and for them to guess what you're trying to get them to do. An issue that 2.0 has helped us with is how to capture those user statistics. So if you are in a situation where you're using a help desk, let's say for customer service, wouldn't you want to know what are the questions that are asked most often and the frequency of those? And then as you start offering solutions, whether it's a FAQ, a class, or maybe you make a change in navigation, wouldn't you want to know if those kinds of questions are reducing? That's the goal. Your top 10 questions on your help desk should be ones that you target and fix, and they end being a barrier to your end users. Now you're going to have others coming up for consideration. And the last thing that I think is key on this is to look at help desk as a gateway. So if you have preferred sites where the end user should be sent for information, it would be excellent to link those in through your Moodle. It could be as general as a Google search, or let's say you have a certain software. Our school district here uses Zangle, and the staff at the school district could recreate training pertaining to Zangle, or they could link to Zangle's help materials. Ideally, it would be a combination because we all have our own way of doing things and accessing things and providing security. But why should we rebuild materials that are being supported by a software support company, for example? And of course, if you are noting where users are going and keeping those statistics, you would be able to see if that is beneficial to you, or perhaps you do need to go in and do a lot of customization. Another example of this, I teach at a university here that uses Blackboard. And Blackboard is wonderful. It has a lot of good features, but most teachers don't use those features. So our virtual campus staff have created a help desk in Blackboard where we can go for assistance. Now, personally, don't tell the help desk that, but I will just go out and Google and say, how do I do this? And often I will see that someone else's write-up on how to accomplish something satisfies my need. So if they were to integrate within their help desk additional support sites, they could capture that end user activity and perhaps upgrade what they're doing. A couple of things I want to talk about on help desk or customer service desk that we would want to consider in your planning. And a little of this is technical, but mostly we're looking at this from the conceptual side. There are different kinds of requests. You would want to set up a schema. The item that you might want to look at is the kind of request that you get. And typically I have used 4 levels. One would be an inquiry, that's just a general question. Do we have access to Flash on our iPads? It could be a problem. I'm trying to get this spreadsheet out and I can't get it to whatever. An incident is when you start getting a lot of comments, questions, problems, help me, I can't, and it all relates to many people having problems with one thing. So for example, working in a healthcare situation, if we were unable to get to the radiologic images from within our EHR, our health record service, and we were getting reports from across the whole hospital, then we're going to have to escalate this and deal with this. We can also take any of these or add other items coming in that we would want to task to a specific technician. It would have a target date for completion, and it might be a build out of a new service. So it could be that it was generated because of a problem or an incident or a question, or perhaps as part of your strategic plan, you're just thinking, if we were able to offer this. Alternatively, from the business standpoint, you could have administration saying, we are now going to offer, and because of that, you need to do some training on it. We know you're going to be putting that training together in Moodle. Wouldn't it be cool if at the same time you could start generating the most frequently asked questions and be able to handle problems before they overwhelm? When requests come in, it is helpful to give them a request rating. I'm assuming you have enough volume that you cannot immediately answer or you need to prioritize. The schema that I use is low, normal, high, and burner. And I have a little flame that we put as an icon there because it's either based on the user profile. It might be someone that we know is working on a project with a deadline to get grant funding or something of that sort, or it could be that the request came in, it got moved around and not handled, and we use SLAs, which are service agreements, server level agreements. If, for example, the call came in Friday afternoon, didn't get handled, days have gone by, it's the end of the day Monday, we're going to raise the priority level so that time doesn't just slip away from us without that customer being served. So if you've got things that are recurrent issues, this is a perfect application for the Moodle concept of a help desk portal, a place where you can have both facts and in-depth courses to help people through. If you know it's always a problem and you create a course that people may have to go through or are welcome to go through before they start using a particular program or service, you can enable them to get past that point without the inevitable frustration that when they sort of discover they've got a problem and now they're held up on their time schedule. You know how that happens. One that we know very well is my password isn't working, and I realize that in Moodle we do have a click button for resetting the password, but it's amazing the number of people who don't see that. So we have found in training at the get-go that we point that out, we show them what to do, and depending on your policies at your organization, you might want to look at, can they get a new password when the office is closed? Are you capable of doing that and having security that's appropriate for your setting? If so, let people know that when they hit that inevitable, it won't work for me, it's possible to reset. Now here's an example. I have a client who wants 2 portals or 2 Moodles, they think. One would be information for their, and that would obviously be at a very high level of content. And then they'd like to have one for their customers or end users, which would be more like the facts that we're discussing. And as I talked to them in preparation for this presentation, they dreamed up a third one, which would be a portal for guests, because they see the promotional value of being able to go in and see this content and understand the kind of support that they give. In their planning, these would be parallel. So we would set up one Moodle format and then make 3 different Moodle sites as they would like to, as they're talking about. So in each of those 3 sites, we would have the same categories of content and could replicate back and forth. Now, I'm thinking myself that we could probably do with 1, maybe 2 Moodle sites and different levels of access. Set the priorities so that someone who's a guest has limited access, someone who is a tech can reach all content, and someone who is as a user obviously doesn't get the technical stuff but more than the customer would, the visitor would. The content, as it varies, you can set a standard, and that's what I would say from this particular visual I'd like you to think of as the takeaway, is your planning. Before you start, don't start doing, what do we call it, the house that Jack built that you're altering as you go along. Set a plan, set some definitions, and stick to that to put together your trial site. Then make your changes before you replicate and do multiple sites or set up different levels of access. Here's an example of a question that would come in from one of our customers or end users. Let's say that this is someone who is very much at a beginning level. How do I open a spreadsheet? Well, we could use the search function in Moodle. We could have tagged or categorized a whole course that might have content in it related to Excel and or numbers, depending on what programs you use at your site. And there could be a full lesson, a whole indexed lesson that would teach about setting up a spreadsheet. In doing that, we could include a short video and have a YouTube or TeacherTube channel for that content. Include step-by-step wording for the person who quickly can read and use it and just needs a reminder. The audio of that written material would also allow us to meet accessibility needs for someone who is a better learner when they could hear things. And I would have an avatar. I'd use the HTML function and build an avatar screen where if they clicked on, someone could come on and say, "May I help you?" Now you could also add links to other tools that might be beneficial. It might be a discussion group. It might be an area where someone within your facility who is excellent at spreadsheets loves to take questions. And you could think about having one of the tools that would allow you to determine if this short lesson had been useful to them. Could be as simple as a choice, did this help you, yes or no? Could be a survey or poll if you want more information. I would just suggest that it be minimized, and perhaps you did this as an annual survey rather than every time someone came in to use some of your content. Another example would be setting up in your training Moodle how to use this service, or again in your help site or help desk Moodle, how to use that site. A couple of things, and some of the classes or tools or fact sheets could be when the help desk guide is most useful to you, when and how to submit a ticket, and then of course when to call for live help. This would allow the end user, customer, teacher to know that you're not hiding as a help desk staff, that you're there for them in whatever format that they need. We also have one for email basics, because we find that our learners may know basically how to send an email, but when it comes to archiving, they kind of get lost. And the security functions are very important for us to remember. They have to understand why we allow or don't allow certain things to happen. Lastly, if there's a section that enters for them do-it-yourself troubleshooting, and they can become more self-sufficient, this is going to enhance your efficiency. I want to remark to you on something that sometimes gets overlooked, and that is to consider from your end user standpoint, what are all the methods by which they might want to get help? They might send you an email. It could be that they actually use a support ticket form that you have on your intranet or on your Moodle site. It could be that you get a telephone call, or as I often find in our schools, an IT person's walking down the hallway and someone says, "Hey, can you help me with?" And that sometimes is the most difficult one or most inefficient one to handle because you don't have a record of activity for that tech. Other ones are much newer, and I'm interested to know if any of you are watching things like a text channel, or you're tweeting, or you've got a Facebook page at your institution that allows you to receive requests from your users in that way. Does anyone have any of those services activated? Perhaps this is something that you might want to look at. How do you integrate within your Moodle help site to receive and record all of those things coming into one Help Central? Now, if your organization is already invested in a help desk software, you may have this in that site. And if your organization is well enough off to afford the licensing on that help desk software and Moodle, perhaps you center it there. Think of these as channels. Think of these as all the ways that your end users might want to turn to. In other words, it's about their preferred methods of communication rather than yours, rather than policy. It's so important for us to be able to meet people where their needs are. And if we can incorporate that and systematize it so it's not more expensive for us, I would strongly encourage you to do so. Now, when you're setting up content, here are some things to think about. As I mentioned, I strongly recommend planning, a written plan. There's nothing like it for sharing your ideas with others. If you want to do it in mind mapping or on the back of a napkin at your favorite adult beverage establishment, that doesn't matter. But getting something down on paper that you can share and look at, or bits and bytes on your iPad or your notebook, it's all great. Just do it in such a way that you have something in front of you rather than words or ideas passing by the air. If I were to put that together, I would suggest that you start with every major component that you offer being listed, so that you, at the get-go, know that you have, for example, in our case, Which Microsoft programs are you supporting? Which Apple programs are you supporting? Are there specialized programs in an institution? It might be for some of our clients, Aloha, which is used for retail, trade, communications. It might be an electronic medical record, all sorts of things that differ with our sites. Then think about your various users and create a list of those. Sounds like we're making a relational database, doesn't it? You're going to be using those to determine what are the levels of the access that you want to allow to these various groups. And it will create a guide to the policy so that you know what you're going to use. At the end of looking at categories and users and policies, you should have a guideline now that will help you determine what are you going to build in content versus what can you link to from the outside that someone else is going to update and maintain instead of you adding to your overhead costs to do that. Pardon me. Then relate to that end user. We have to have them help us with content because if you're on the technical side, you know, we get into a language that is not always understood. I often have found that resistance to Moodle has come from a lack of knowledge of the vocabulary that I or one of the trainers might be using as we're describing Moodle. So just think about how do they talk, how do they understand it, and can we speak their language rather than our own? And then if your outline is such that you've thought ahead, how can you expand and grow this particular portal for changes over time? You've got the scalability, you've got the ability to alter to meet needs without having to tear down and build from scratch. Also be thinking about if you're going to use or access others' materials, do you have copyright issues or permission issues? Stay cognizant of that from the very beginning. You're setting a standard for your organization, and how you do things will be replicated in how others do things. Think about a schedule that you will build in. Will you review every course, every fact sheet, every aspect of this every 18 months? Or are you going to wait until things are out of date? How can you get proactive so that you can budget for it, get your staffing set for it, and stay one step ahead of your end users? The privacy issues are also a consideration. When we're working with students in the United States, we have FERPA. When we're working with healthcare information in the US, it's HIPAA. And so if we were to use information that might take screenshots with student or patient information, we would be out of bounds with FERPA and HIPAA, and therefore have to build in time to either create a fictitious student or patient or redact the material so that names and identifying information are blanked out. All in all, you'll want to have some very deep discussions on when do I create content instead of linking to something that is already built. I'll again return to the aspect of using Blackboard at the university where I teach. I go out to Google, I put in what the problem is, and I can pick up 15, 20 other schools and universities that have something they've put together. And when I've read through or just scanned 2 or 3 of those, I'm pretty much ready to go and can adapt it to policies at my own university. Get a little bit more technical here as we pass through. Here we're looking at in structuring in your Moodle what you might want to be addressing. First of all, how are you going to set up your Moodle classes? I tend to use the topical rather than any other method, but the social course structure is intriguing to me, and I wanted to stop and see if anyone is using that format for your offerings and what kind of success you've had with that. Be happy to also turn over the microphone if there's anyone who wishes to speak to that. I see Anthony's got this on his bucket list of things to do, maybe in the future, that you've been interested in trying social but never implemented it. I'm sort of in the same boat. I've played with it a little bit, but I cannot call myself even a beginner or a novice, let alone expert. So I was really hoping we had someone online today who's done it and might see how that could work in a help desk or customer support concept, if not within the teaching concept. I'm going to continue for time's sake, and if I see someone else respond to that, allow me to come back to the social course structure and see what your experience has been. When you are setting up your template for how you want your help desk Moodle to be viewed, think about standardizing certain tools and resources. I would suggest that the header block in each of your courses, as I'll call them, clearly shows the topic, has a field for keywords that would be searchable, and a field that shows the date of the last update. Now that might scare you a little bit because you're thinking, oh gosh, if people see that it was last updated in 2014, they may think less of the content. Indeed, it will give some social or peer pressure to your staff to keep things up to date, but it's very helpful if you have a user who uses content and can say, you know, I got that from the help desk, and now you understand that perhaps they are following old information. Matthew, you've used social in classes. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience with that? Okay, so I don't know if I have to turn on something for you, Matthew, or if you can activate your microphone there. Oh, you don't have your mic set up. Well, okay. Why don't you type a few words, and then we can take it offline afterwards in discussion forums if there's more to be said. And I'm returning now to how to set up a course offering, a help desk offering with your standard tools and resources. So we've described the header block and things that I think are beneficial for you to include there. I would also connect every single class to a thread in a discussion forum so that you can organize and help someone go directly to that. We're familiar with that as people in technology. If you go out to just about any software these days, there's a user community where you can chat back and forth and read comments from other techs who have had a similar problem or something that might help you other than just what's printed by the company that supports that software. A chat screen and a message screen are also very valuable. In the ideal, when you have a big staff and you can have someone monitoring all day long, for them to be able to manage your Moodle and be able to see who's online and who's sending messages, that would be just wonderful. Not many places have that kind of money or staffing these days, but consider building those blocks into your template. And lastly, you might create a couple of HTML blocks for posting your most frequently asked question of the day or the week. And by people being able to just browse and see that, you know, you might be able to cut a few other people from the queue. Also, you could have an HTML block that shows what your featured in-depth courses are, or live sessions, meet the tech sessions might be appropriate for you at some point. Now I need to verify that you all can still hear me. I just had a sound in the room like we had an interrupt on our, okay, thank you. Great. It's the time of year when internet goes down quite a bit. I don't know. They claim it's the leaves on the trees, but we do have interruptions here and there. On templates, think about templates by kind of information. You might have a template that addresses your FAQ information, And you all know what those are. You get a question all the time. You know that by answering that question, your text or yourself, you have some standard things that you say and you want to build that in. Once you build that into a what's the problem, what's the solution, look for these concepts, look for these problems, then any other tech can answer in the same way that the lead tech has, and you'll have consistency across all of the answers going out. You could have a template for orientation sessions, and this would be a step 1, step 2, step 3 sort of thing. The in-depth courses, well, we're back to Moodle as we know it as trainers, and you could do just about anything. You might have a 4th template, and I just put in other because your situation may be such that there's another format that would be beneficial to you. I'll watch the chat screen in case any of you have something that you might suggest there. I would also encourage you to create flowcharts of the processes you will follow so that you have a flowchart for providing all of your responses, for creating new documentation, and for the frequency and method by which you will review your statistics so that those statistics, as they guide you, will give you your plan for growth and for change over the coming months and year. So let's look at what comes from going through this whole process. First of all, you're going to create a documentation database. I have found that in all sorts of organizations, whether we're looking at schools or retail sites or service organizations, hospitals, anything, that documentation is touted as very important, tough to do, and very expensive. And I find that in IT, we're especially that way, that we're on the fly and we're working so fast that we don't always get the answers documented. So think about how your Moodle site can enhance your organization's knowledge management. KM, if you haven't looked it up lately, has been a concept around for some time. I have put in this Moodle site for the class today one academic article about its benefit in what they call corporations or corporates, but don't be put off by that word. It's good for small business. It's good for universities. It's good for any kind of school or training facility. And also to be thinking about when you do that documentation, how are you capturing knowledge that other areas of the organization might use, such as in marketing. So in documentation, the primary needs that I have seen are in IT, in management, in managing grants, anything where we have to keep a record, and if we had that record, we could prevent ourselves from making the mistake more than once, or perhaps we could copy and paste text to more quickly create a document, create an answer, create that new grant. The reasons that documentation is not well done has to do with the cost of staff and staff hours and effort that it takes. In one of the organizations where I was CIO, we set up a Moodle site that was to be a requirement every time someone went to a continuing education activity. We asked them to come back and tell us what they learned. That would give, by doing it in the Moodle site, someone who was creative and wanted to upload a short video or use any other format other than straight text, a good way to offer. And by instantly being able to publish, all of our other staff could learn what this person had learned, and it might inspire dialogue in the cafeteria. We had a requirement that for a person to get reimbursed for travel for training, they had to put in a report, and therefore the reports went to the finance department and got lost. So now we had a way to shorten that whole flow of information from the person going and learning to making it accessible throughout the organization, and it became a checklist rather than a responsibility for the finance department. We could move it over. I think, ladies and gentlemen, that you can assist your organization, helping them understand that Moodle can become the tool of choice rather than putting the money behind licenses for other software if Moodle's skills and abilities will meet the same need. What I'm trying to say here is you might have duplicate software and it may be something that's very high priced. Is there something that if you brought it over to the Moodle home would be a cost savings for your organization? Now, the biggest win that I see, when you set this up and it is accessible 24/7, the users can become self-sufficient. And this becomes a learning portal for them. They think they're looking for help, they're looking for an answer. From where I sit, it's an opportunity for them to learn and be able to get some knowledge, also to have that security that they're not going to waste time searching, that there's one place to go, sort of like a shopping center, if you will, for the information. Secondly, that better user skill means that your help desk, your support staff, will have fewer requests that require live interaction on repetitive or recurring questions. Now, I'm not saying that it's an opportunity for the help desk staff to not have to talk to people live, but the nature of those questions and the kind of skill that they have will elevate if your more easy ones, your more uncomplicated ones are available through other means. And thirdly, you could provide a knowledge base and a community platform by helping users find solutions independently, and that's through your Moodle. And that's pretty much what I've prepared for you today. I'm wondering if there are any comments or questions that we could share. And I'll hush for a minute watching the screen, as well as if there are any of the little hand signals that come up saying that you've got something that you'd like to share. Thank you, Bob. I see your comment, and I appreciate that. Hope we have the chance to chat more at another time as well. I understand that. Well, just to inform you folks, we had a power outage here a few minutes ago. I'm still operating, and I know that it won't be too long before everything goes totally dead. That was a dog. That's Lucas. I call him the mayor. In my spare time, I run a bed and breakfast, so he's the mayor of Jarvie Homestay, and he's over here shaking because I can hear the power battery downstairs beeping, and he doesn't care for that so much. He's mostly Border Collie with some Lab and Spaniel. Like I say, he does think he runs the universe, or at least the bed and breakfast, and so he's kind of on the outlook. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much again. I will stay on as long as my battery is here up until we close out at 11. Please go ahead and go get your lunch, do whatever. Thank you for your time this morning, and I'll look for you in chat and other places should there be questions that we didn't have a chance to handle. Thanks.
Mary, thank you for a great presentation, and especially for your being able to work through all of the issues between power outages and not having the internet this morning and interruptions by the mayor. So you've been a real trooper. And so really appreciate that. And for that, we've given you a badge for staying calm and moving on. So great job. Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm laughing.
Good. Thanks everyone for participating in this session. The next session will be, there are two. One is on physics remote labs integration with the Moodle platform. And Tim Hunt is doing a presentation on quiz at the Open University, how we use it and how that helps students. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. But folks are welcome to continue to post questions for as long as Mary is able to be with us. Thanks everyone, and have a great day.